it's Panquetzani
and Makeda,
bringing you a video that we were inspired to create here in the jungle. We've been in Costa Rica for about 7 days now, and being in this really natural setting where there's wild animals and just creatures that you hear and you don't see them, and just being inspired by having our feet on the ground surrounded by so much nature, but at the same time so much tourism, so much exploitation, and so much expropriation of land and culture and values, that we were inspired through our conversations to have a little discussion on video about how we feel about cultural appropriation in the work that we are in the healing world.
Yes, we are here in Costa Rica teaching where, in the Caribbean coast, where there are a lot of indigenous people. Many of the indigenous tribes in Costa Rica are still intact. They still sing their traditional songs and play their traditional instruments and speak their language. And there are also a lot of people of African descent on this side of the country who come from Jamaica and Trinidad and other parts of the Caribbean and have mixed with indigenous people here, but also indigenous people on those islands as well. And in the Americas, Africans and indigenous people have been coming together, sharing information, and fighting together since the beginning. And we all know the story of the Americas. South America, the Caribbean, North America, Central America have all been colonized by Europeans. And our issue is that, you know, under colonialism, a lot of our traditional medicine, our traditional practices has been made illegal. We can be thrown in jail for practicing it. We need to get licenses and certifications from the people who colonize us, who then study our medicine and know such a small percentage of it, and then try to make these certifying bodies.
Yeah, and when you're a person who's privileged enough to have access to information on how to go through processes on how to become a certifying body, when you're privileged enough to have thousands and thousands of dollars to jumpstart a business, and when you have the privilege of expropriating anything you want at any time, that is a form of power. And who has that type of power in our communities? Mostly white people, mostly Westerners, mostly white settlers. And the same is here, we're noticing in Costa Rica. For example, the background music that you're hearing is not a really cool soundtrack. It's a bola of white people sitting around a drum, playing indigenous music downstairs.
And they're playing the music incorrectly. We've been here for a week, working, drumming, dancing, practicing indigenous womb massage techniques and various holistic health techniques, herbal techniques. We're on a land with lots of wild herbs and wild plants that grow that are rare here. And the place that we're teaching at is owned and run by a Greek woman who says that she's dedicated to preserving and revitalizing indigenous medicine, which it doesn't need to be revitalized. The indigenous people here and the Afro-Caribbean people here already know about herbs and know about these things. Same thing is true in Puerto Rico, in Cuba, in Dominican Republic, in Jamaica, in Haiti, in Brazil. So it doesn't need to be revitalized, number one. But number two, she hasn't sat in on 1 hour of anything that we taught. And we have Panquetzani is an herbalist, a true herbalist, and grew up in these traditions. And for someone who's supposed to be passionate about this information, she never sat through 1 hour. But yet, we're done teaching now, and we're getting ready to leave. And we hear a circle of white people downstairs singing indigenous songs incorrectly. The drum sounds dead, okay? So the drum is not tuned properly. And that's disrespectful because, like, I personally don't mind if white people study our medicine because we do have very effective medicine, so I don't mind that, but one must be humble. Like, to learn a little bit and then act like you're a master and teach and you're teaching incorrectly. That's how our stuff has become miscategorized. I'm a huge student of Afro-Indigenous dances in the Americas, and there's a lot of wrong information because what the colonizers recorded when they saw us dancing was all wrong. So a lot of the stuff that we have to look back to find out about what our ancestors were doing comes from these incorrect documentation of what we were doing.
Right.
So that's a problem.
Right. And let's also talk about language. Makeda mentioned revitalize, preserve. In order to revitalize something, to bring something back to life. So a cultural practice back to life, a worldview back to life. You have to really understand its rudiments. You have to really understand the base. And for folks who don't understand that base and are trying to revitalize it, there's no revitalization going on there. It's something that you're passing on that's very weak, that is misinformation. And not only that, but when you talk about, I want to revitalize this, you have to go to the people who gave birth to that. So for example, if you want to revitalize Mexican traditional medicine, you go to a Mexican person, and the Mexican people will take it upon themselves to bring new life to something in their culture, in their religion, in their worldview, in their science that was murdered. They need to be the ones to bring new life. It can't be anyone from the outside telling them that they are going to bring new life into, bring new life from something that they created. That is abuse of power, that is abuse of privilege, and it's also overlooking the more than 500 years of colonization, oppression, and violence that we indigenous people have had here in the Western Hemisphere.
And this is something that we've both been feeling for a while, and we decided on this trip to actually speak about it. We have morals, and you know, it's like, we're not anti-white and we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but at the same time, certain things need to be said. And I felt like this very strongly about this for a long time. Like for example, on my blog, I have a blog entry about an organization called Sacred Pregnancy, who I spent about $4,000 studying with, and they had a training, a postpartum training called Mother Roasting, where they take a lot of indigenous practices from Asia, from the Americas, from Africa, from red and brown and black people all around the world, and they get these beautiful photos, and they get like 1% of the information, put a little sentence and a beautiful picture. And I remember doing the training, and nobody really knew anything, and they couldn't answer more questions, they couldn't explain in depth. And afterwards, you know, I would post something on Facebook, and Facebook friends of mine who might have been from Thailand or Guatemala would say, oh yeah, well, my grandmother did that, and she did it this way, and used herbs, or it was a bunch of information that was not shared with us. And it's taught, again, all by white people. And that's not cool to me, because our ancestors have suffered a lot of trauma and abuse for trying to practice our traditional medicine. And the songs, the dancing, the drumming, they are meant to be a specific way for a reason. You play the rhythms a certain way for a reason. Their vibration is where the medicine is. And if you are singing incorrectly, you know, it's like somebody singing gospel flat. Like, gospel's meant to be sung a certain way. The soul has to be there. You can play the rhythms and do the steps, but if your soul's not right and it's not involved, it doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. It's not the same. And it's actually disrespectful to the medicine. Yeah.
It's not only disrespectful to the medicine, but it's disrespectful to the ancestors.
Yeah.
So when colonizers first came in 1492 and 1519 to our land, Mexico, Central America, the Southwest United States, they actually cut off our hands, they cut off our tongues, murdered us. They would strip babies from our bellies, feed them to dogs, because we practiced our medicine, because we practiced our religion, because we practiced our language. And to ignore all of the blood that has been shed to keep this music, the ceremony, and the herbs, to keep that going for so long under such repressed conditions, to overlook all of that is to really step on our ancestors. It's to really ignore all of the blood that was shed, because it is through them and through their bravery and through their survival that all of this medicine is here for us today.
Exactly. And that's really, we're very passionate about healing ancestral trauma and bringing the truth, about our ancestral traditions, which have been distorted. And if somebody doesn't do it, if somebody doesn't do it, it won't get done. And I descend from Seminoles in Florida, Black Seminoles in Florida, who were fighting against the U.S. government for a long time, and awful things that happened to red and brown people in the Americas. The dancing, which is so much medicine for people of African descent who have come over here. They took away our drums the same way they did with indigenous people, because they knew it was powerful. It was connected to slave revolts and communication. And the same thing with the dancing, and that's one reason why I'm so into it. There's many situations that I've been in where there has been a white person who knows a little bit, who's like trying to tell me what to do and correct me, and I'm sitting around masters of those rhythms who grew up in legendary families who are not saying anything to me, and they would correct me if I was wrong, and they're very nice and humble, and they don't have like some random white guy who knows a little bit trying to tell me what to do constantly, and he gets told he's doing it wrong. And so it's the not being humble part that's the issue. It's very bold and a lot of nerve to do that. I can't imagine going to China and saying that I'm serious about learning Chinese medicine and then being in China and not talking to them and teaching. And that's crazy to me.
Yeah. So what are some things that we could all do to help the true revitalization and the survival and wellness of our community and of our medicine? We could, one, stay away from organizations like the one Makeda mentioned. Stay away from folks who teach from a perspective that is not honoring, respecting tradition, ancestors, and also by gathering together, getting women you love together and having these dialogues, having these discussions, because the discussions that Makeda and I have been having this past week have been very healing and have provided a lot of clarity for us.
And another way that we can also play a role is by practicing these things, talking to our grandmothers. And there are many people from South America, from the American South, whose grandmothers did things that they thought was weird and didn't make sense, or from the Caribbean. So talking to the older ones in our family before they pass and finding out as much as we can and putting that into practice. Also, our family stories are very important. For Black people in the United States who are very mixed blood, I've never met a Black American who didn't have indigenous blood, and we all know what tribe, but yet we get told by geneticists that, or certain people, that we're exaggerating this. And as somebody with a background in biotechnology, I know that the genetic coding is not an exact science. There's so much they don't know about genes. So for me, talking to your family is important. If your grandmother and people in your family are telling you that you have, a Cherokee in your family, or Blackfoot, or a Seminole, and you do a genetic test and it says it does, you don't, your family stories are very valuable, and speaking to your family, finding out what they did and putting it into practice. I'm always encouraging people of color to go to dance classes, Afro-Indigenous dance classes, whether it be African or stuff from the Americas, because there is a lot of medicine in those dances. They come from a situation where we were really oppressed and dealing with a lot of abuse, and these dances and the drums and the songs were medicine. That's why they did it. They didn't just do it just to have fun. So us practicing and learning these things is important, because I go to a lot of dance classes. Most of the dance classes I go to that are African, Congolese, Afro-Caribbean, it's mostly white people. There'll be a few Black people in the class. And part of that is because a lot of the white students have the money to keep going 3 times a week for years. So a lot of us don't. We have to work, we don't have the money. It's an expense. But making it a priority to do that, because I see a lot of Black children like myself when I was a kid being put in classical ballet, knowing nothing about this stuff. And then you go to a capoeira Angola class and you see all the white kids in it. The white people know. You know, the white people know, and it's like we're not doing that. So we also need to start embodying and practicing our ancestral traditions as well.
That's right. We're going to leave you with that and hope that you carry that embodiment from the inherent knowledge that you have, from the knowledge of your families and the inheritance of your culture. And sorry about the background noise. We promise next video there's going to be a little bit better ambiance.
Yes. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.